to Horse Sense Radio. I'm your host, Christine Rolando, and we're here today with Horse Sense Radio, as I said, and we are recording an exciting show about the Millbrook Horse Trials today. Horse Sense Radio is everything that makes sense, or I say Horse Sense is common sense. And I love to have guests on the show that make a difference in the world. People that are changing the world, people that are doing things that are special and things that are, I want to say, changing and impacting. That's what this is all about. And if you'd like to listen to the show or share the show, you can always find our shows on equineappraiser.net. That's equineappraiser.net. So we're here today with somebody very, very special, which I've had on my live radio show years ago and had the opportunity to go to the Millbrook Horse Trials to meet with Louise Meryman. Hi, Louise. Are you with us today?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Louise. So, all right. So our listeners are horse people, most of them, and they understand how much work goes into a horse show. Never mind, it's just, a month away, a little more than a month away. So you are a woman.
2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks, right. I better get my calendar right. Oh, dear. Right, I think we were originally supposed to do this in June. 2 weeks. So, say the least, Louise Meryman is one of the founders of the Millbrook Horse Trials, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. So her time is limited, but I want to thank you for joining me because in 2 weeks, you're going to have over 2,000 spectators, many, many riders, and people from all over the world joining you in your backyard as your guests will come into town. So how are we holding up? Doing good?
We're doing fine. It always feels completely overwhelming, and it always ends up just fine.
It always does. And I've had the opportunity to go out there, and you were gracious one year to let me come out and do live radio right on the course and interview many of the competitors, and it's just exciting. So if you haven't been to the Millbrook Horse Trials, you need to put it on your calendar, and that takes place July 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th. And just so our listeners know, the Millbrook Horse Trials has become one of the most premier equestrian events on the East Coast. And as I said, attracts so many spectators and world-class competition from all over the world and abroad. So it's not a small horse show, to say the least. But with that said, Louise, tell us a little bit, how did it get started and when? And you don't have to give us, because you're busy, just share a little bit, if you would, about how it all got started.
Well, in 1983, a barn that I was leasing in Millbrook burned, and all my clients and my own horses were lost. And a few of my clients got together immediately, and we bought a piece of land close by, which was a dairy farm, an old dairy farm. It had been a working farm for multi-generations, and we built what we called the Millbrook Equestrian Center. That has been sold now and is called Cool Park Farm, and it is the same property that the horse trials has been on since 1985. So we have continued the horse trials on the same property for all that time. And there is a horse operation, a boarding and lesson operation on the property, but the bulk of the property is in land easements and belongs to the Millbrook School, and we have use of it. So we have been fortunate to be able to continue the tradition. And it is a very big show. It has Olympic caliber riders and horses that may go to represent the U.S. in this coming Olympics. And it also has local riders, beginner riders. We have every level from beginner, novice through advanced. And we also have a fairly extensive sort of country fair. We have shops and markets and food trucks and a petting zoo, big petting zoo, and arts and crafts for the kids and all kinds of stuff. So it's a really fun outing. And the best days to come are Friday and Saturday because those are cross-country day. And cross-country is the most exciting part of our sport.
So you just shared a little bit about the history of it when it started, and there was a bump in the road a few years ago because we had this awful thing called COVID, and you had to take a pause, right? I think it was the gap year you called it. So you took a pause. 2020. 2020, yeah. So that was a weird year for all of us, for sure. But you got it up and running. That had to be somewhat challenging to reboot it, but you did it, and here you are again.
Yeah. And it was even more challenging because we ran it in 2021, and then in 2022, we were unable to come to an agreement with the people that own the actual horse facility. And so we could not run last year. So we are back again after a year off. So, it's even more challenging because we did not run 2 out of the 3 previous years.
However, with the experience that you've all had and your team has all had, you're able to get it right back on track. And if our listeners just tuned in, I'm talking to Louise Meryman right now, one of the founders of the Millbrook Horse Trials. And this is a huge horse show. This is not only a horse show that's recognized here in New York, however, all over the world, because what does that term mean, horse trials, Louise, for our listeners? Horse trials, because there's not many of them, are there?
Oh, there's lots of horse trials. Horse trials of eventing, which is really an equine triathlon. It is dressage, which is a bit like skating, ice skating, where everybody has to do the same movements and they're scored 1 through 10. So that's a very disciplined, artistic phase. And then the second phase is the cross country, which is ridden at high speeds over fixed obstacles, jumping into water, jumping ditches, jumping up on banks. And obviously at the entry levels, they're small and they're very inviting. And by the time you get up to the people who are U.S. team riders, the fences are very intimidating. They are big and they're complicated, but the horses and riders have been training, moving up the ladder for years, and you build an incredible trust with your horse. And it's just wonderful to watch because you feel what a partnership it is, watching these beautiful animals galloping around the country, jumping these amazingly complicated big fences at high speeds. And then after that phase, the third phase is show jumping, which is jumping the painted fences in a ring, the fences that you get penalized if you knock rails down. And that then they take the scores and they do it as penalties, not as positives. So the person with the least penalties is the highest place. And then they place the overall weekend. There are no ribbons, no prizes for each phase. It is a triathlon, and it takes a very, very skilled horse that can be top-notch in all 3 phases. And rider takes a lot of training.
It does take a lot of training, and you said it's the most impactful thing to stand there and watch these horses going at high speed. You use the term of fixed fences. These fences, they don't move, do they? They're fixed. And we're going to get to it later on in our show. We're going to have a wonderful guest on, the course designer, and he's going to share a little bit about how that all takes place. But you said it takes a lot of training, and it does, because you're talking about 3 different disciplines, as you just so eloquently described, what a rider has to come together with not only their horse, perhaps they have a trainer. It's a team effort, isn't it?
Oh, yes. That's what wins it. It's the partnership. The horse bails you out when you're wrong, and you try to bail out the horse when you're wrong. And And it takes a great deal of trust and being able to read each other's minds.
So let's back up a minute. Let's take a deep breath, because you have a show coming up in just 2 weeks, and it's a huge undertaking. But where did it all start for you? As a child, you've ridden this course, you've been there, you've done every aspect of this lifestyle. Where did it start for you?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Maryland, but to a totally non-horsey family. And I wanted a pony, I think, from the moment my feet hit the ground. And my first couple of ponies were Icelandic ponies that came from an unbroken herd down the road from us. And I had ponies until I got a horse that was half Morgan, or half thoroughbred, quarter Morgan and quarter Icelandic, which you can imagine how funny looking it was.
Interesting.
Nice Dorset stripe. And when I went to college, I brought my horse up, and I was working weekends on a farm that the husband did 3-day driving, and the wife was interested in 3-day eventing. And that was where I got bitten by the bug. And I bought, the owner had me buy a horse for the wife that she ended up never riding. So I rode it, and I did my first events in Vermont and New Hampshire. And I met Michael Plum, who was then captain of the U.S. team, at a clinic. And he asked me if I wanted to come be a working student at his farm in Maryland. And I said, you got it. So I was working for him for quite a while. And then I started the place in Millbrook, New York. But I was fortunate enough to be asked to train with the U.S. team, and then subsequently rode on several teams and got to see the world that way. And it just has been my life from start to finish. It's horses, horses, horses.
Well, Horse Sense Radio is all about that. Interviewing people that make a difference in the world, people that follow their heart and their passion. And most of the guests, I always ask, where did it start? And often it does start as a child or a young person, that influence and that undeniable passion that you have. You know, the horses aren't easy. People think, oh yeah, you just get on them and you make them go. You don't put a quarter in them and they work. It's so much team effort, right? You're laughing, but you know. And what about that? Go ahead.
I'm laughing because I would say with horses, at least competitive horses, there are far more disappointments than there are successes. And it takes a very strong commitment and passion to stick with it. And that's the only way to progress.
Not giving up and learning from your mistakes.
Right.
So the pressure, riding on a team like that, what did that feel like at times?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. There's obviously a ton of pressure, much of which you put on yourself because it seems all important in the moment that you be very successful. But it's also just the most wonderful experience because you're in a team. It's a team effort, and you work so closely with your teammates and the grooms and the vets and the blacksmiths and the coaches, and you know, it really feels so much bigger than yourself.
Well, with regard to the team, you must have a huge group of volunteers and team members to put this show on. And if our listeners just tuned in, I want you to mark your calendars for July 27th through the 30th for the Millbrook Horse Trials. It's something you must experience right here in the Hudson Valley, New York. So what is that like for your team? How do you put on a show like this? And I know we don't have enough time to go through all those details, but it takes an army. How many volunteers do you have?
We have probably 200 volunteers, and then we have a very skeleton staff. And Olivia von Melkamp, who is part of the organizing committee, she and I both were the people that started the event back in 1985, the first one. So we've been doing it a long time. We have deep roots in the community. That makes it much, much easier